Welcome to Challenge Steps, the podcast where we challenge each other to a new movie or TV show every week. I am Frank, and I'm joined by Thomas.
Oh yeah, people, we are back for our first episode of 2025. I am hyped. We are starting with such a banger. This is so good.
Yeah, so we actually did a poll over on Threads. Again, guys, follow us on the social media. And we asked, what themed month should we do next? And John Williams won handedly. So we're going to be doing the John Williams month. And then you and me sat down and talked about the movies that really impacted us. This could be a 3-month event. I mean, he's got so many bangers.
So many. Yeah, that whole filmography, I was looking at everything. I'm like, God, everything that was great from our childhoods, like he did the score for.
Yeah.
And I might make one of the boldest claims I think I've ever made on an episode today. And
I'm excited.
I don't know if people will disagree. And we're coming off a lot of controversy because the Golden Globe just happened. But I will say, I think this is a perfect movie. This for me is a 5 out of 5.
You know, and I know the episodes where you and me agree so much are not very fun. So this one, guess what, guys, is not going to be very fun because I agree with you. This is so good. And I want to throw in, so first off, let's get some housekeeping out of the way before we get too far to Jurassic Park. So we had the shelter, the animal shelter fundraiser. I want to thank you guys personally so much for everybody who donated to that. That was so cool to be able to give back to, a community thing. We're definitely going to be doing something like that again next year. We learned a lot on how to do it better. If you guys have any ideas on the fundraisers we could do for next year, we have plenty of time. Just let us know. We're always open ears.
Oh, yeah. Anything to help the animals, too, I'm like always on board with it.
Me too. I'm a sucker for them. Oh, my God, yeah. And then this year we have a lot of conventions coming up. So if there's, we're going to try to tell you guys plenty ahead of time so you guys can come out and hang out with us if you live in the area. You're going to the first convention, right? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, coming up in March, we have WonderCon, and it's kind of becoming one of my favorite conventions of the year.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm spoiled. I live here in San Diego. We have San Diego Comic-Con, probably one of the biggest conventions in the world, but it's so big that you don't get to do everything. You don't get to see everybody. So going into WonderCon, which is in Anaheim, it's right there by Disney. It is such a blast, and it feels like back to the core sometimes of like what a convention could be. It's smaller. The people go all out in the cosplay. You can make panels that you want to see. It's such a fun time. So that's coming up early March.
Yeah, so we'll remind you guys as well. But if you guys are in the Anaheim area and you guys want to come and see Thomas, please do. I'm sure that would be a lot of fun.
Love to see you.
Yeah. But yeah, 2025 is going to be a very big year for us. We have a lot of movies that are coming out. We have big goals for the year. We're going to be pushing YouTube more for the podcast. One of the things I heard over the break, we're all back from Christmas break and stuff like that. And I heard family members like, why don't you guys do more YouTube videos? I like to watch on my podcast. And I'm like, well, first off, because that's not really where the listens are at. But
right.
And it's way more editing for old Frank. So, keep that in mind.
Yeah,
but we'll put that effort in. We're going to start doing more YouTube videos for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, please come follow us over there. We're going to have the links in the show notes. Come check it out. But yeah, if you kind of want a little taste of what, is going to be on the YouTube episodes, come check us out on social media. Again, Frank does an incredible job of putting together the clips. They look wonderful. And we kind of throw out some of the highlights. But if you want some of the nitty gritty, the details, the setup for the jokes, come out and check out the episodes on YouTube because, man, I don't know. I don't want to brag. I think some of our conversations are pretty good.
Yeah. and some of the videos do really well, like the RRR episode still. I mean, holy cow.
We got to throw in some of those more foreign films, I think, for sure. But again, kind of bringing it back to what we're talking about today, I'm so happy we're starting with this. It's incredible that we haven't done Jurassic Park. It's such a massive movie. And I want to say we're going into year 2, maybe 2.5 now or something.
2.5, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy we haven't done this. It just shows how many wonderful, amazing movies there are. And, it's funny, I know how incredible this movie is, and yet I kind of forget sometimes because it's a long time between watching Jurassic Park for me. I don't know, when was the last time you watched this outside of the challenge?
Well, that's not good because I do watch a lot of these, The Hook is another one, right? Where I watch them all. I watch them often. I'll throw it on and just revisit the childhood. So when was the last time you watched it? And then next question is, when's the first time you watched it?
Yeah, that's great. So it's got to be years. It was probably 5 years since the last time I watched the original Jurassic Park. And I've tried to go back and, I say go back, but kind of the newer ones with Chris Pratt, I've kind of jumped into some of them. And I feel like they've all been trying to chase what this original one was. But even that, like, when did this come out? 1995?
93.
93?
Yep.
Yeah, so I was 6, 7 years old. Yeah, and I just realized how many movies are chasing what this original one did. You know, the hype, the scariness of it, the wonder, all of this, you know, I think is perfectly set up, and it's basically hinted at in every scene because of the score. But you know, I just remember being terrified as a little kid when that shift happens and Nedry powers down the whole park, and the T-Rex is pushing against the fence. Oh my God. I
What
just
a scene.
the water shaking in it. We're gonna dive into it and we'll break it down. But man, I just remember being a kid and being so scared of this movie and all these different scenes. So yeah, what a crazy time being a kid.
I was
watching this.
8 years old, I think, when it came out, and I saw that this is the second movie I ever saw in theaters. It was in Reno, and the parents they were trying to keep us entertained. It's Reno, so it's hard to keep us entertained, especially at this one place we were at. But there was this like hole in the wall theater that was part of the casino where they had couches instead of chairs. It was crazy, and
Wow, that's wild.
I know. And then watching this at 8 years old, like every boy is either into trains or dinosaurs, or usually both. And so seeing this movie, and I remember so well, like the scale of the dinosaurs blowing me away. And that was all that was on my mind, was how big T-Rexes are. And so this movie was super impactful back then. And then when I watched it this last time, I was like, you know what? Let's change it up. Let's watch it in VR. So I watched it in VR, like I watched The Boys in VR as well. My God, it brought me right back. I actually texted my friend Joe, who me and him are kind of like, we talk about cinema and how it impacts us a lot back and forth. And I was like, I haven't felt that wonder from Jurassic Park in a very long time. But that moment when they see the Bronchiosaurus, I think that's the right term, again, that first, like, you know, the iconic scene.
Where he
that moment again
Nellie's
with
head.
yeah, exactly. The theater sound too from the headset, like it's the actual theater sound and stuff. It was like being a kid again in front of a big screen. It blew me away all over again.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it does. It's one of those movies that does transport me back to being that child. And and it's incredible that the special effects still hold up as well as they do.
As well as they did. There we go.
Yeah, as well as they did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think they still do. I mean, I think it, like I was watching this, you know, because we were kind of traveling. So I started it on the iPad and then I got home and finished it on our TV. And I'm just looking at how the T-Rex jumps over, you know, the walls and the raptors on the tables in the kitchen. And I'm like, I really feel like the special effects still holds up so well. I mean, we've seen so many movies now over these last few years, even new movies. And you're like, this is the best special effects can do now. It's crazy when you have a Lord of the Rings or Jurassic Park, you know, this kind of stuff. It still looks amazing. Still looks amazing. And I think this movie still really, really holds up.
It's all about the lighting, right? Because I think that's the weakness with CGI, is that they can't ever master lighting. And a lot of times when they do full CGI scenes, they really botch the lighting. But in this one, I think the ones where it's in daylight, it's a little more obvious than the ones that are in dark. But when they're in the dark, especially when there's rain, like that T-Rex scene, ageless. That'll always be perfect. Yeah. And then the mix of practical, like they built the head. So like when it's actually breaking through the top of the Explorer, that's actually really happening. And if I remember correctly, the kids were scared in real life because they didn't expect it. So it's like, that's even better. Like, not cool to say The Shining kind of situation where it was like, the real fear makes it even better movie.
Yeah. There's so many cases where it was abused in real life, but in this way, it was like, yes, I'm glad they caught that on film. Sorry, kids. It seems like they're both doing well now, so I think we're all right. But yes, I think that it just the mix of practical and CGI, I don't think we should ever truly get away from that. Yeah. And it just works out so amazing in this. I don't even know, like, do we even break this down? Because I feel like
I think we do. We got to do a quick breakdown. I think just do the main things.
All right. So we open the movie with a whole crew trying to move a raptor into the park. It doesn't go well. Dude kind of gets eaten. Then from there, we jump over to the Dominican Republic, and one of the attorneys there talking about the investors, and they find one of the amber encased mosquitoes. We then jump from there over to the Badlands of Montana and meet Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler. They are on a dig, and some big investor guy in a helicopter comes and like ruins their dig. Turns out it's Dr. Hammond. He opens like a rare bottle of champagne, but he offers them a deal they can't refuse, to go and visit the park. Now at the park, we also meet a Dr. Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, which is one of my favorite all-time Jeff Goldblum roles. He's just a wild, but like a chaos theory doctor. I don't even know what he's actually actually a doctor of in this movie, but he's just like wonderful. He
chaos.
he just pushes against Dr. Hammond the entire time. But this is great. And then we kind of get to see them see all the different dinosaurs and realize that these things are real now, and their minds are blown at every twist and turn. There's different things that are going on in the park, and he kind of shows them the way that the dinosaurs are created using parts of frog DNA in order to create them. But one of the big things is that they are all supposed to be female and not supposed to be able to reproduce. Now, there is also a side story going on with Nedry, something Knight. He was also in Seinfeld. He's trying to steal some of the embryos, get them off the island, and basically give them to a different company. Now,
20 seconds.
Wow. Okay. Things start falling apart. Nedry messes up the power. Dinosaurs start breaking loose, and it becomes a survivor story of Dr. Grant with the kids who didn't like kids trying to save them, and then on the opposite end, Dr. Sattler and that crew trying to work to restore power and contact the main island so that they can get off of it. Basically, kids survive. They all kind of reunite at the end. T-Rex saves them with the dinosaurs, and they get off the island. Fly away.
There we go. You saved it at the end. You wrapped it up quick.
I did, yeah. I rushed through the last hour very, very quickly in 20 seconds.
All right, there's all kinds of symbolism. One of my favorite ones, like, like the broken foot, the Lord of the Rings one, that I always like, hey, did you know the seatbelt scene when they're landing the helicopter and his seatbelt's not working? It's two female ends that are not connecting because that is symbolizing the fact that the dinosaurs are all female and they still find a way to work when they combined. And so he ties the two seatbelts together, like, it works.
Wow, that is so awesome. I also took it this time, like, even though they're these archaeologists or paleontologists, whatever you want to call them, he still finds a way to like make that situation work and find like a safe way to do it, showing he's also quick on his feet, and it later comes into effect when he's able to like save the kids. So I think it also does a good job of kind of foreshadowing his character and like the way he's going to act, throughout the movie.
Yeah, he definitely grows as a character, I think probably the most out of everybody, from the, I don't want to be a dad, into showing that he's the best example of being a father out there. Do you think that character growth has any reflection on like the main themes of the movie? Like, to me, one of the biggest themes is playing God or mixing science with ethics and stuff like that. Do you think that has any applications there?
Not I didn't really think about that, and I'm sure there is some ways you can connect it, but I think more so it shows that there was a humanity, or there's also a purpose outside of work. So maybe there's something there too.
Okay,
because there's a lot of as you look at the investor or that lawyer who's constantly at first against Dr. Hammond. He's like, I don't have to give you this money, and we see him and his whole mindset change, like, we're going to make a fortune, and just seeing like the wonder and kind of almost like exploiting nature when, Dr. Grant kind of comes back to the simplicity of like, there's just wonder here. There's magic here, just because it is, not because we need to like exploit it for financial gain. So maybe there's something there, but that was me spitballing, like trying to pull something out of the weeds.
He and Hammond, I think, mirror each other a lot because there's like they both are super passionate about this one thing. There is family that they do care about. For him, it's his girlfriend or his wife, and for Hammond, it's his grandkids. And then like putting that all aside for survival at the end. So there is something mirroring there. By the way, Hammond is very different than he is from the books. In the books, he's a ruthless businessman, and in this one, they made him so lovable that you're just like, I want to hang out with Hammond. He's a good billionaire.
Yeah, he's like. Blameless in a lot of ways. I mean, yes, of course, it's his fault that all this kind of happens and yada yada. But it's not because of it is like it's so tricky because it's like you could say it's hubris, but it's also like naivety. Like this is amazing. So it's like if you could do it, would you not? And I love that ethical debate that we get later on with Malcolm in the room, and he's basically talking to all of them as they're sitting down for that meal before shit really starts hitting the fan, and it's like. You can kind of see it from his perspective. If you could do this crazy, amazing thing, would you not try to simply because you could? And their pushback, especially Malcolm, is like, whatever the line is, like, just because you knew that you could do it, you never stopped to ask if you should. And I think that is the main theme of the movie.
Where it's 100%, like,
right. And I think we probably see it now with AI going on. There's so many things of like, where is this going to change the course of history? Are we going to basically knock ourselves out because we wanted to create this incredible technology and we don't really understand like the ramifications of what it's going to do in the future? But either way, like I love these little tidbits. I don't feel like there's any throwaway lines. I feel like it kind of perfectly sets up every character and then what they're about to experience, especially at that hour heel turn when the power goes out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a thing like with the chaos theory that we get from Jeff Goldblum, and then like the power goes out. It's kind of a good moment for that, where we try to control nature so much, and nature will find a way, and
life will find a way.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of it too. Again, like the way you're bringing in the AI thing, it's like we want to make sure that we could use AI as much as possible, and we'll put in these safeguards. But if AI is successful, will those safeguards work? And
right. Or
so
will
then
it find ways above the safeguards?
Right. Yeah. So when you look at this movie, if you were in Hammond's shoes, which way would you be going with this?
Yeah. I know. I think that is the beauty of this movie. It's not complex in a sense, right? Like it's very straightforward. Build dinosaurs. They, technology fails, and then they do what dinosaurs do, and they just start hunting everybody down. And then it kind of becomes this alien-esque movie. But there is this complexity for me where it is like I understand kind of where Hammond's coming from. It's like he's done something that nobody really would be able to do. And even now, right, like because this movie came out, there's been so much science and so much that has changed for what archaeologists know about dinosaurs because this movie forced scientists to look at it in the real world and be like, could this work? And I love that. Like you've seen in the later movies, the raptors have feathers now, right? Because they're right. Like it really, they did kind of, they're de-evolved birds. And then they have now brought that into the movies, which is kind of cool. But also I feel like it kind of dampens it a little bit too, because it's like, you kind of just gave into this, I don't know, you know what I mean? But I also like Dr. Krant's perspective where he's just it's amazing. And it's like, should we also push back on the things that we could do? It's the whole Oppenheimer story.
Great point.
If you could make a nuclear bomb, it's like, this is the most amazing achievement that mankind has ever made. But its whole purpose is to destroy. And it's like, it's this moral dilemma. And I feel like that's here in this movie. If you really look for it, like that, it's not so subtle, but it's there, but it's also not in your face. And I love that just like dainty narrative where you have to kind of tiptoe around it in a sense. Yeah, I could definitely see that. And then I think for the movie too, what they do to just kind of soften it a little bit so that we don't hate Hammond, that's a great way
is they give you that shadowy other company that clearly is like nefarious. So we're like, okay, well, Hammond, while we're questioning whether or not he's doing the right thing, there's somebody who's doing something worse, so it's okay. And I think that helps us a little bit kind of grapple with like still liking this character. But it is definitely the question that you walk away with, and I love that when it's a question where it's like there is no right answer to this. It's just fun to kind of contemplate, and like if they opened up Jurassic Park today, my ass would be there so fast. I would be there in no time. I've seen the movie 100 times. I don't care. I'm there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, people, there's a lot of like moral dilemmas even now with zoos and stuff. And I'm kind of on board more with, if these animals couldn't survive in nature, it allows us to kind of see how they live. And for me, I think it creates a lot of empathy in younger kids, especially for me. It's like these animals should be protected in nature. And I feel like that would happen with Jurassic Park, but also like the investor guy is right. He's like, God, we could charge people thousands of dollars to come here and they would pay it. And it's like, I probably would. I would save up for a year to go check this out. Hell yeah. And but I also like the pushback on Grant's side where he's like, no, this has to be for everybody. Like everybody, or actually it's Hammond himself that even says that.
Yeah.
So
unrealistic.
Right. But like also like it's a part of his character where you're like, you don't feel like he's a totally terrible businessman, which they're normally portrayed in these movies. They're just like money hungry and they're willing to like step over everybody. Like he's not like that. And it's a different take on, a billionaire business owner that has a super unique idea, which we kind of get in like a Westworld. It's just different than that. And so it's kind of cool.
It's funny you bring up Westworld because they're in the same universe. These are Michael Crichton. They're both Michael Crichtons, and Jurassic Park and Westworld in the same universe.
Interesting. Well, there you go. Man, talk about like a legend of like creating this world and like would people pay to be there? And then what is that moral conversation, which is very much Westworld, kind of with AI too. So
Yeah.
there you go, Thomas. All right, you connected the dots without knowing the behind the scenes.
Nice job.
Yeah, count that as a win.
And then so this movie is it's lauded for its actors. It's lauded for its characters. Dr. Grant, Dr. Sadler, their relationship, I think, becomes real by the end. In the beginning, it feels like it's so one-sided. You can see that she kind of fawns. There's a little bit of an age gap, it feels like. She definitely fawns over him. He's kind of that smart professor thing. Kind of makes you almost a little bit worried with today's lens. But over the course of the movie, we're seeing that...
Still works.
It still works. But over the course of the movie, it feels like he opens up a little bit, and she proves her value beyond just being his girlfriend, essentially, right? Which I think in the beginning of the movie, we're kind of pitched that, like, oh, she's a botanist. Like, for just the layman's version of us, why would you need a botanist when you're digging up bones? You know, he's the one that's actually valuable out there. She's just, by the end, you're seeing that, like, no, she is a badass. And he has to soften up to come to her standards, not vice versa. So I think that there's, their relationship has become, actually valuable by the end of this movie, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I think you nailed it. And then, yeah, she absolutely proves her worth, and they wouldn't survive without her. They wouldn't have made it. She brings up so many good points. She's also the one where Dr. Hammond makes her and that team go out and restore the power. He doesn't go out there. So she kind of has this. Yeah, again, if I use the reference of Alien, when you look at Sigourney Weaver's character, you're like, you don't realize that she's the main character and that she's going to be the badass that survives at the end. Dr. Sattler in this, or Ellie, is very much that way as well. And she proves her worth, and she's awesome. And just what she's able to carry. What is the actress's name right now? I'm trying to think of it off the top of my head, and it's kind of Laura Dern.
Laura Dern, I'm just thinking of, like, was that Pretty Little Lies or whatever, that she's Big Little Lies? She's on that. She's so good on that.
Yeah, that's right. She is. Yeah, I think about, like, Nicole Kidman and all that, but you're right.
Yeah.
And it's just such a well done movie. Everybody kind of has their place. I love her character journey in this too, and yeah, I think you're right. I think Dr. Grant at the end of this is soft, and he's open to the idea of, like, my job's not everything. Also, it kind of shows that his job, he's kind of showed in this that his job wouldn't be as important if dinosaurs did exist. And he's able to kind of let go from that. The idea of having a family becomes more important to him. The idea of her being his partner becomes more important to him, especially as Dr. Malcolm flirts with her the whole time. And you can kind of see, he's like, wait, am I jealous? Like, have I been taking you for granted, on these digs, and how amazing you are? Have I not realized that? So it's just all really builds on top of each other. And I think this love triangle in this oddball way really is just awesome. It's really well done in this movie.
Yeah. And then when we look at the kids, Tim and I believe it's Lex. I'm trying to find if that's the right name. I think it is.
Lex. Yeah.
Do you think, I think for me, they're probably the narrators, right? The audience member of the movie. When you're a kid watching this, you're like, hell yeah, I would love to be in this adventure. But then watching, like, they show you the horror you're supposed to have when the T-Rex breaks out. They show you the wonder you're supposed to have, or just like how cool these cars are as a kid. And then as an adult, when I'm watching this, I'm just like, do not turn that light on. Or, you're like, kid, what do you do? Like, go faster over the fence. Let's go. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, where he throws on the night vision goggles. And, the lawyer guy's like, don't touch that. You know how expensive that is? It's like, of course you want to grab the night vision goggles. But seeing, the goat that's still in the cage that night, and Dr. Grant's like, that's not going to work. A T-Rex wants to hunt. It doesn't want to be given his food. And then by the time it does happen and it chomps that little goat, you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. Yes, the kids are 100% our stand-in in this movie, especially Lex, but he finds a cool way to tie her into the movie too, where she's able to kind of hack the computer. She talks about it. I want to be a hacker, and
so 90s. The way they visualize that is like this, like, 3D world with files in there. I wish that's what it ended up being. It's no way near that.
Right. It's just like code and text and all that stuff still. But like, it was so wonderful. It's so 90s. There's even a part towards the beginning of the movie where they're at the dig and he's like, all we have to do is shoot a laser down and then the laser's going to bounce back and we're going to get this digital image. And even that, it's like ding, 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 ding. It's almost like a fax machine. And when they're like, this is such incredible technology. And I turned to Christina and I was like, oh my God, like this was supposed to be like the coolest shit, you know, like even I mean now it looks like nothing. You're like, God, I get better reception on like an iPhone 1, but it just looks hilarious, you know, and I love that kind of reminiscing of this time period.
Same thing with all the like the pseudoscience that's going on. We know they joke about like, oh, the raptor obviously becomes a bird and everybody laughs at him. Nowadays, it's common knowledge that the bird thing happened. And I wonder how much of that science being developed, it comes from like kids that were motivated by this movie, then take up dinosaurs. And then now we have like a plethora of paleontologists or whatever. This and Ross from Friends really boosted the career.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it had such a big impact. I mean, you could see it in so many movies now, like how much they rip from this movie. Yeah. You know, we made a lot of references. There's the, you know, obviously the Westworld of it all, but then there's aliens and all that. But I feel like from horror elements, we haven't even talked about why this movie, I think, is so successful from like a feeling standpoint. And it's because of John Williams. And he takes a lot of his experience from some of these older movies that he does. But every scene, he sets the feeling from wonder from them seeing the Brachiosaurus to the danger of them pulling up to the T-Rex spot. And then also them getting hunted, the two kids by the raptors in the kitchen. Every scene is perfectly set up. And I think so many movies have tried to emulate it in their own way. But these scores are so iconic that, yeah, I don't know. I guess I can see it now in Marvel movies. You know, when you get to that point of that epic reveal of Bucky turning to Cap and, you know, them being like, hey, I'm with you to the end of the line, bud, and I don't want to fight you. It's just, or them charging at each other in Civil War. It's like all of these amazing moments are pulled from this sound, from the score of this movie in so many ways. And it's just, it's fantastic.
John Williams in general, I think one of the things I remember the most about him is the fact that you can remember the movie based off of just the main part of his score. And I think that's something that the people try to replicate a lot. I think we all remember the Avengers theme song, and it's not a John Williams thing, but that theme song will play throughout 10 years of movies. You'll hear it when they're first in New York, and then you'll hear it when they're about to fight off Thanos, just a little different version of it. And I think that's the same thing with this, is like that opening scene of the helicopter coming in, that is so reminiscent of Jurassic Park that all it takes is just to hear a few beats of that, and then all of a sudden you remember that helicopter coming in. And then the whole time John Williams with this particular film, I think he tries to mix wonder and fear together. And depending on what the scene is, he leans one way or the other, but never forgets the other side. So like when the helicopter's coming in and we have like, it's a full wonder sound, right? But there's this little kind of like, especially as it slows down and it starts to come down, the helicopter, it starts to turn a little bit ominous. And then when we're seeing the T-Rex breaking out was silent, but when the kids are being chased by the Velociraptor in the kitchen, it's tension and high and stuff like that, but also kind of like otherworldly in a way that like this doesn't happen anywhere else. You're seeing it here. It's amazing that John Williams was able to capture all that with music, the full emotion and wonder of this movie.
So well said. Yeah, and I want to throw it out there on Front Street. It's like, I love music. It's one of my favorite things, but I don't know anything about like music construction. I don't know how we're supposed to like set this up, right? But yeah, I just think there's this level of overwhelming joy you get and wonder when you see the first Brachiosaurus, when you see them pull up to like, you have a T-Rex, that whole idea, to just the water and the stomping of the jello or a stomping of the water, you know, and then the water shakes. And then it makes me also think of the jello in the kitchen where the kids are like so happy and they're finally eating.
And she's like holding it. It's just shaking like crazy.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Like just the reverberation.
There's so many scenes, so many moments from this movie that are just like hard freaking drive into our brains now. Yeah.
hardwired in there, so heavy. Yeah, like if you ever show me a shaking water, like that is 100% Jurassic Park. And I think they've done it in other movies, right? Where there was like in the puddle, I think in like some of the later movies and stuff.
Yeah.
But everything is trying to chase this high, and the music again sets up everything. Even when they're sailing away, I say sailing, but like coasting away in the helicopter over the water, and he's looking at the pelicans, and he's like, I know what you were a million years ago, or like 10 million years ago, whatever it is, and also like, just it's still wonderful. Like I had this terrifying experience, but like the evolution of it all and the magic of what nature is able to do is fully brought through here. And I think it doesn't land nearly as close. Like this movie's half as good without this score.
So true. And then like, if you think about before this movie, what was the music accompanying dinosaurs, right? There's none. But after this movie,
right.
Well, after this movie now, if you ever have dinosaurs on screen, they're going to try to mimic John Williams because they have to find that mix of wonder because it's dinosaurs and fear because holy crap, it's dinosaurs. And he just set the pace. It's like the same thing what he did with Jaws, which actually I don't think we're talking about this week, but Jaws, forever now when the shark is in the water, we know that you have to kind of go the dun 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 because he set that standard now. To create a standard out of nothingness is pretty impressive.
It very much is. Yeah. And yeah, I just feel like everything he does is so unique too. I mean, he finds ways like you know a John Williams score, even if you've never even if you don't know, you know it. Yeah. And it's still all unique, but you're so right in that you can just hear a few of the notes and you're like, I know exactly what this is. And this movie just it makes you feel things just by listening to it. It's beautifully shot, it's beautifully paced. I think that all of this is I want to know what that relationship is. There's a documentary that we have to go and watch before the end of this month that's on Disney right now about John Williams. And I feel like I should have done my homework going into this, but that is 100% on the list this week, and we'll probably have some tidbits from it. But yeah, he and like the directors he's worked with, it seems like there's this perfect relationship. It's kind of like what Michael Giacchino is doing with Marvel right now. I think he's creating so many wonderful scores and like anthems for everything with Wakanda, although I think that's Ludwig, but neither here nor there. I think some of the big theme songs, and that's just the power of John Williams also. Like I think, we're going to talk about it more. I think we'll have more in-depth things to say, but it's just like, God, it just sets the mood for you so much. And you're just like, I'm going to go on this crazy adventure. And it's so apparent here.
Yeah, you can't talk about Jurassic Park, and really you can't talk about John Williams without mentioning Steven Spielberg and how much that's such a great partnership of understanding. Like they both know how each other think, and that's amazing. And then when we look at this movie and how I remember very well from the early 90s watching like Entertainment News would be talking about the filming of this movie because it was such a big scale, and it was the new Steven Spielberg movie, so everybody was listening to it because of that. I remember very well, like, hey, this is how we're going to design the roar, and we're bringing in bison sounds and all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and line roars, and we're pitching it down, and
it's so cool.
So I think that's a great place too. Like I kind of quickly want to talk about like this. We kind of talked about it while we were setting this up, but it's like the idea they had like a dinosaur supervisor that used practical pieces and puppetry and like some unique animatronics for this time, and then like legendary VFX as well. And I think that was such a again, we talked about, like, for me, the CGI still very much holds up in most of the scenes. The ending, to your point, with the light and the T-Rex coming in and saving them and eating the raptors, is still, it's starting to look a little bit dated, but other than that, every scene is wonderful. I just love that they use the kind of, like, the puppetry with it, and I think it's something we're getting back in good Star Wars. When people are like, wow, this looks incredible, for now Skeleton Crew, I think Skeleton Crews looked wonderful. It's because they're using practical mixed with CGI.
100% agree. The Bronto I think looked kind of rough, but there's that whole thing where when you zoom out, you're supposed to use CGI. When you zoom in, you're supposed to use practical effects. And the T-Rex is a great example of that. Like when the T-Rex is pushing the Jeep, CGI, but when he's smashing into the kids, or when he's got the eye that zooms, oh God, that's so iconic. The eye zooms in and out depending on the lighting. That's all practical effects, and it's just like, but that's where the details at. That's where you want to make sure that it looks perfect in the light and stuff like that. So, it's a great mix, and it's something that I think we've kind of forgotten lately. They actually intended this to be claymation at first, and you can see the claymation. I'm going to post. I'm writing down notes of things I want to post. I'm going to post behind the scenes of them making the T-Rex. I'm going to post the claymation version of the Velociraptors going through the kitchen too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something why Star Wars still works. That was stop motion for like AT-ATs and that kind of things, and yeah, it still really works. And nowadays with the way CGI works, it's like you can kind of smooth out some of that claymation or stop motion, I should say. And I just think they perfectly used it for what they had available at this time. I think it's like one of those reasons for me too, like why the Lord of the Rings movie still holds up. Yeah. They've just used this perfect blend of those things, and this was so ahead of its time. Like I just, when you asked me earlier, like, what do you remember from a kid? Like, I just remember being wowed when I first saw all the dinosaurs. I'm just like, holy crap. Man.
And it still delivers that wow. It still delivers that wonder. And I think, again, leaning back on the reason we're discussing this movie, so much that is John Williams, because when music touches you emotionally, that doesn't go anywhere. Visually we could see the difference over ages and stuff like that, but still that uplifting soundtrack or the dread of like, we have to hide from raptors, that is going to be there from when you're 10 years old to when you're an old man like me. That's always there.
I completely agree. I think, music just kind of touches you in a certain way that is so tied to your emotions. I noticed it recently as, we watched The Wild Robot for my New Year's Ask with my wife, and we both bawled our eyes out. There was just that time where the song comes in and she's helping the little gosling learn to fly. And it's like, that music, seeing it is, of course, but there's just this way you can. This is something that I've heard that they're trying to do in the future, especially with movies, right? We're getting 4DX, and they're trying to make you like blow wind on you or pump in smells. The more you can tie in different senses, the more you're going to feel whatever that director is trying to put in you. And I mean, that's definitely where we're going with movies. Maybe people will want to adapt to it, maybe they won't, but I just think you get such a more visceral experience the more elements you bring in. And just because of what they were able to do at this time, just the feeling and the emotion they bring out of you because of the score was so ahead of its time, I think, for this movie.
Yeah, this movie I could talk about for hours, but honestly, I like that we're kind of focusing, because of the John Williams aspect, on how it made you feel and its impact on us. But I know that there's so many people out there who watch so many breakdowns of this movie and think like, well, but the dinosaurs weren't correct, or they're not all from the Jurassic period. Most of them weren't, things like that. But honestly, in the end, the fact that this movie still sits with us for so long, I think, is what's most important, is how impactful this was for us. And I think it was impactful for a lot of the people listening too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every movie that's come after this has tried to capture what this movie felt and set up.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. What do you think? Are you ready for fun facts or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first fun fact too is like, I think we probably have the same list, but that we kind of talked about it. Did this set up a bunch of scientists from the future or in our time, basically when we were kids? Yeah. And it seems like it did, right? Like, interest in paleontology waned during the atomic age and space race, but according to Dr. Nate Smith of the Natural History Museum and Dinosaur Institute, Jurassic Park coming out generated a bunch of interest among young people that wanted to become paleontologists and get into the field. So I think, yes, this and Ross Geller, man, they got people into like the museums and like, brushing off dinosaur bones in Montana.
Oh, God, I want somebody with the editing genius. Please make a version of this where Hammond actually goes to New York instead of Montana and gets Ross to help out on the island.
That's amazing. That
seeing him deal with the T-Rex and like the flare.
Yeah, there's so many ways they could cut in, and then Ross being like over exaggerative or like, I'm a paleontologist, and then Dr. Hammond being like, oh man, there's a lot they could do with that.
According to the behind-the-scenes book, The Making of Jurassic Park, an adventure 65 million years in the making, the infamous roar of the Tyrannosaurus Rex was a composite mix of a dog, a penguin, a tiger's snarl, alligator's gurgle, and a baby elephant's squeal. The very deep alligator vocals acted to be the low-frequency elements of the final roar. However, Gary Rhinestone stressed that the key part of the sound is the high-frequency elements, the baby elephant. So much of that sound is baby elephant, but there's so many penguin is in there and stuff like that, dog too. I just love that somebody's sitting there just like toying around with it because you're making up a sound that has to be believable, but we have no real proof that it sounded like that, you know?
Yeah. I'm always fascinated about that. Like it's even comes to mind with Star Wars when they were talking about how the ships and the engines would sound, especially like I'll always remember what a pod racer sounds like. Because it was so unique with that gurgle and everything and like the engines revving. Like it was so good. And yes, I think the T-Rex roar is still iconic because of that too. And now that you mention the elephants, like you kind of hear it. It's like low and like a growl, but also there's that high pitched kind of squeaky elephant noise too. You're like, wow, that's so cool how they did that. I'm sure that was such a fun, unique process for them.
Oh, I bet. Recording different animals to try to find like the perfect mix. And I wonder if we were to remake this movie, Jurassic World is being remade, but I wonder how they would do it now. If they would actually, because I know right now we could 3D print vocal cords or whatever and can mimic sounds like we've heard now, like King Tut's voice and stuff. It would be interesting to see if they could do that again.
Yeah. So I got this next one. Let's see here.
Yeah.
The guest encounter with a sick Triceratops ends with a clear explanation as to why the animal is sick. Michael Crichton's original novel and the screenplay, however, included an explanation that the Stegosaurus Triceratops lacked teeth to grind their food. And so, like birds, they had to swallow rocks and use the gizzard stones. In the digestive tract, these rock, blah, blah, the science. But like in the movie, it looks like they had these berries that were possibly poisonous. It goes on to say, about West Indian lilac berries, the fact that the berries and stones are regurgitated explains why Ellie never finds traces of them in the animal's excrement. So they really thought about everything.
That's
I feel
crazy.
like really, I don't know why. I recently saw a video of these, what are they, ostriches? And they dump all these rocks in a barrel, basically. Have you seen this? It's like a trough.
No.
And I was like, what the heck are they doing? And you'll see ostriches eating all these rocks. And it was like something like on interesting AF on Reddit. So of course, like Reddit, they has like super geniuses on there. If you ever look through the comments, but basically they were saying is like, they don't have the digestive system to grind down their food. So they eat rocks basically to like mash up the food in their belly. And that would make sense because this whole point of Dr. Grant's thing was like, they were evolved birds. So, or de-evolved birds. So I guess they really kind of tried to incorporate that into the movie as well. This guy, Michael Crichton, thought of everything.
Yeah, well, speaking about Crichton thinking of everything, when asked, why did you put Jurassic in the title and not like Cretaceous period or anything like that? And he just said, basically, that it just looked better design. It was a better looking design. Basically, it's a cooler name.
Yeah.
He thought of everything, including marketing.
Yeah. Which is what I would say when people push back on that. I would think, like, if you've ever been in a corporate meeting and you talk about how you're going to pitch a product or whatever, like, there's the science of it and then there's the marketing pitch that people would connect to the science. That's 100% what they would call it. They're like, I know it's not accurate, but like, we're not going to call it Cretaceous Park. Like, there's just not as much ring to it, you know? So that makes a ton of sense. One thing recently, and if you're a fan of Abbott Elementary, I love this because it happened in their recent Halloween episode, but I'm blanking on their name, Janine and Everybody Hates Chris.
Everybody Hates Chris. Yeah.
You see this episode? You know exactly
of course,
where I'm going.
Dino DNA. Of course I do.
Right. I loved that. Christina didn't even know. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, you didn't know their costumes? Which nobody does in the episode, which also makes it great.
But it's funny that you're bringing that up because in the episode when nobody knows, I'm like, how? I would be walking up to them and be like, amazing.
Amazing. Yes. You'd be like, that's one of the best costumes I've ever seen. I love it that Steven Spielberg used Mr. DNA as a way to condense a lot of the novel's exposition. But to me, it's still one of the most there's so many iconic moments, but that's still one of them. The Mr. DNA. Like, we use dino DNA. And then they show you digging into the ground and how they extract the DNA from the mosquitoes, which was such a unique way to look at this. Yes, we know science has disproven it now, but back in the day, that was a genius explanation.
It was, yeah. Actually, I kind of want to touch on this because I was like, I didn't read the books, guys, but I wanted to look at what the differences were from the book. So we'll make this part of the fun facts. In the novel, first off, I mentioned this before, John Hammond is a much more ruthless businessman. And so it's less about the charm that he has, you know. Also, the novel delves far deeper into the genetic engineering of it all. The movie simplifies that so it's accessible for everybody. The Malcolm's chaos theory is explained a lot farther as well, but they try to simplify that down, and he tried to distill it a lot with just life finds a way. Like, he just tried to make that make sense. They streamlined a lot of the plot. Yeah, like the lawyer has his own subplot that's very big. There's a river chase scene with the T-Rex. They omitted a lot of that to tighten up the pacing, and then they added their own scenes that didn't exist, like the T-Rex breaking out, to kind of just explain things as a turning point, make it faster, make it more punchy. And so Steven Spielberg took something that was like a good idea from Michael Crichton and then really punched it up. And I think this is an example of an adaptation, probably. I haven't read the books, but I would argue probably better than the actual source material. And so much so, I'll put this into it. It's not actually in my notes, but I know that Hammond dies at the end of the book. And in the movie version of it, he survives. So, and in the second book, he survived too. So Michael Crichton's second book, he changed it based off the movie. And very rarely does that happen.
Interesting. That's crazy. Yeah. Can you imagine like Game of Thrones changing because, you know, it did so well, like it changed.
You picked the one example I know for sure that happened in two. So,
really? Oh, okay.
Asha in Game of Thrones. Don't get me started. Asha in Game of Thrones. George R. R. Martin liked how they did her so well in the show that he changed her character in the book to be more like the show version of her too.
Got it. Well, there you go. Okay. Well, so it does happen, but also like those are the two best examples. I'm sure there's tons of examples of movies that have bombed because they deviated so much so from the source material that it didn't.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, I love it. I think they just absolutely nailed it on this movie. Again, for me, it's a perfect movie. I wouldn't change a thing about it. I don't even know if, you know, like if they could go back now and then update all the CGI, if I even would want them to. It's like, I just don't, I don't even want it messed with. I just think it's so perfect the way it is.
Leave it exactly. I watched it, you know, in the VR mode. I've also watched it in ultra high def. It's great in ultra high def because it was filmed on film, so you could do that. It's totally worth a watch again, guys. It still holds up in many, many ways, and so much of that is due to John Williams. So it's a great flick.
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect 5 out of 5 for me too. And again, I think the most iconic scene I would say is the T-Rex breaking out. We're gonna try to post the most iconic scenes from each of these movies that we talk about. Yeah, and for me, I think it's that T-Rex breaking out.
Oh, shoot, yeah, yep. T-Rex breaking out. That's a great one. I want to say the raptors trying to chase them into the kitchen, or even trying to break into the room where Dr. Grant and Sattler are pushing and trying to hold the door, and she's hacking away. Her eventually getting chased by the raptors and pushing back into the wall, and she's like, oh, whatever Samuel L. Jackson's character was, and then the arm just falls on her. I think that one was great. One thing that still creeps me out to this day, though, is Nedry, where he crashes the truck, and he goes to like rig it up so that he can pull himself out, and then he's like, you dumb animal, whatever. He's like, no wonder you're extinct. And then he gets spit in the face. Those scenes, I think, will live with me forever. Like, still remember all. Okay, last one has probably not going to make like a clip out of it, but was when they were dropping the cow into the raptor sanctuary. Yeah. And it just you hear it, all the trees rustling, and you hear it getting shredded and like
the awful sound moving. Of the raptors.
Yeah, and the raptors like shrieking. Dude, those scenes will live in my head rent free for the rest of my life.
If we didn't talk so much about how this made us feel, there are so many one-liners that I mean, I think I still say today, like "clever girl" and stuff like that.
Dude, nailed it. That's one I say all the time still.
Referenced all the time is the when they're trying to hack into his that little like sound of it. I see that referenced all of the time. I think it's in Bob's Burgers even. It's all over the place. Yes, that's just so classic. And then I think probably, because I was trying to think when I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, we want to focus on iconic scenes this year. And so I'm like, probably the most iconic is the T-Rex breaking out. Maybe Laura Dern's head being turned around to see the Bronto.
Yes.
then I was like, what other movie has such iconic scenes? So I was like, okay, Star Wars, biggest movie I could think of, right? Probably most
Definitely.
popular.
I think The
What
Matrix.
scene from that movie is as iconic as like the T-Rex breaking out? What do you think?
What was it again? What movie? Sorry, I was thinking in my
The
head.
first Star Wars, the first one.
First Star Wars. I think when Luke first like lights up the lightsaber, I would think that one's
Yeah.
pretty iconic. I would think the duel between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. when
That
they
to me, I
walk
think
in.
is probably the most iconic scene from that movie. If not that, probably Luke flying down the
Outside of
Death Star. You know, yeah.
Yeah, I think
But
that
I don't
one.
think
Yeah,
they're
he
as
shoots a
iconic as
torpedo.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think maybe a different generation would push against that. You know what I mean? I think because we grew up in this time where this was the wildest technology, I think this probably hits for us maybe a little harder. But like, I think for my
Yeah.
dad, I think Star Wars iconic scenes would hit harder.
Okay. Actually, yeah. Okay. Go into Phantom Menace then. More our generation. Pod
Mm-hmm.
race is very big for us.
Oh yeah,
And then
The-
that final the Duel of Fates, which
Yep.
John Williams.
I was gonna say. Yeah, perfect example. Yeah, and I think that one will always live rent free as well, with Darth Maul coming out, and then Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and then the red doors.
The
kind of
red
shutting.
doors. Okay, there we go. We found Star Wars' most iconic scene right there. Okay.
Yeah, from that
Interesting.
movie.
From that movie.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let us know your favorite scene, your favorite moment from this movie. I know that there's a pile of them. And again, I got to suggest watching it in VR. This was a great movie. And of course, one of John Williams' best. But let's head over to another franchise that John Williams had a hand in. And again, when you hear the music, I immediately imagine the scene. But we're going to go to the third movie in the franchise, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So
Yes.
we're headed to Harry Potter, folks.
Dude, and talk about behind the scenes. Get ready, people, because I just got to visit Warner Brothers Studio in the UK and got to see like the sets, the costumes, like how they filmed, the creatures, all kinds of stuff. So this is going to be a dense episode, but oh my God, I love this movie so much.
Yeah, it is so good. All right, guys, join us for that, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Aloha.